Class, this is the first part of Chapter 1 for Bio 1005. What you want to do to get started as we go along is get your study guide for Chapter 1, and as we go along we'll be filling it out. This movie will end at 20 minutes, so I suspect we'll have Part 2 also. So if we look at our first term on our study guide, it is biology. So what is biology? It's going to be the scientific study of living things. I'm going to go rather quickly because I know you can pause if you need to. That way we can cram as much as we can into 20 minutes. So why take this class? Hopefully this class is not just going to be a class you have to check off to get your associate's degree in your science box. Hopefully you're going to find and appreciate how much this class really relates to real life. All kinds of things are happening in the news, and we are going to be looking at those things. So there's lots of stuff you can apply to real life in this class, hopefully, and hopefully I'll make it fun. So your first concept question is about the properties of life. So what this really means is what makes something alive. So we have order. If you look at our pine cone, you can see there's incredible order here on how it's built. All life is going to have order like that. We also have sensitivity or response to stimuli. If you need a visual clue for that, you can think of a Venus flytrap catching a bug. All life is going to respond to stimuli somehow. The third property of life is going to be reproduction. So if you look, we've got the little alligator coming out of the egg. Life has to reproduce or it's not, the species won't continue. Our fourth one is adaptation and evolution. All things adapt to the environment, and this is how we also evolve over many generations. So our fifth property of life is growth and development. You're going to grow and develop from an infant into an adult. And then our sixth one is regulation / homeostasis. So this word homeostasis might be new to you. So that's also in our terms. So if you go back up into the terms of the study guide, homeostasis is the ability of an organism to maintain constant internal conditions. So it's pretty much the same as regulation, like you're keeping your temperature the same, you're keeping your pH the same. We'll talk about pH in a later chapter. So a memory trick for this, homie needs to stay as is. So if you think of that, that's what the word homeostasis means. You are trying to regulate and maintain constant conditions. So our seventh way of properties of life is energy processing. For us, this is going to be eating. Okay, for a plant, that's going to be photosynthesis. For other organisms, they also have to either eat or they have to process energy somehow. So that is your first concept, question, answer. So life is structured on a size scale, and in this class, this is an overview of all of biology. So we're going to cover everything, but we're not going to go as deep into some things. You could take further classes in biology to go deeper into them. So we're going to start with atoms and molecules that make up our DNA, which is our genetic material. And then we're going to look at cells. We are going to look at animals and plants. And then we're also going to look at the entire planet and ecosystems on that planet. So if we look how your book breaks these down, there is this picture in your book. It starts with an atom, moves to a molecule, an organelle. This is going to be a part inside of a cell. Then we have cells. We are going to cover all 4 of these in the first few chapters. We do not cover tissues, organs, organ systems. That you would want to take a human anatomy class for, or human physiology. We just have such a huge amount of material to cover that we don't cover humans as much, like detailed, their organs. So then at the end of the semester, we'll be looking at organisms, populations, communities, ecosystems, and biosphere. So there's a note on your study guide to know the order. That would be something like a multiple choice question, not something where you'd have to memorize this list. So let's do an overview of cells. If you look at your study guide, the study guide asks, what are the 2 categories of cells and how are they different? So the 2 categories are going to be prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Prokaryotic cells are bacteria. They're going to be much smaller. They're simpler. They lack organelles and they have no nucleus. Eukaryotic cells, this is going to be your plants, your animals, your fungi. They're going to be bigger. They have a nucleus. They're more complex. They have organelles. I have pictures of these on the next page. But with science, probably with a lot of subjects, you want to look at your word and the prefixes in the word. Maybe come up with some memory tricks to remember these words. So if you see prokaryotic, you have the prefix pro there. So pro can either mean you're like for something, some cause, or it can kind of mean before. So these are the cells that came before. They were the earliest cells on the planet because they're very simple. So if that helps you remember prokaryotic, they came before, they were the first cells on the planet. We'll cover that when we get to evolution. Eukaryotic, the way I remember this, is you are eukaryotic. So if you can remember that silly saying, you are eukaryotic, then you're going to get, okay, that's going to be a more complex cell like animals, plants, and fungi. I've also got the word organelle down here. It's not on your study guide, but you're going to see that word a lot. So to help you remember that, you've got organ plus L in French. That's kind of like a cute little organ inside of a cell. So if that helps you there. Here's the picture of what I just explained. So you've got this small cell. It's pretty simple. This is the prokaryotic cell, smaller, simpler in structure. This is the eukaryotic cell. We've got this ginormous blue thing in the middle. What is that? That's going to be the nucleus. And then we've got these pepperonis. What's that? Those are going to be the organelles. And we are going to learn about those in a couple of chapters. So life is diverse. We have over 1.8 million species. And how are we going to classify them all? So this guy, Carl Linnaeus, came up with a system in the 18th century. And we still use that today, although we have added to it. So we've got the 3 domains of life. So if you look on your study guide, you've got list the 3 domains of living organisms and briefly describe the types of organisms found in each. So the 3 domains are going to be bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. So you've got this prefix again, archaea. Where have I heard that before? If you've heard of like archaeology or the word archaic, archaeology is the study of really old stuff. So these guys are really old. We're going to briefly give some more information on those later in the semester. But if I go to the next slide here, bacteria and archaea are both prokaryotic. So these are going to be those simple small cells. So that's what I'm looking for on the study guide. Briefly describe the type of organisms. Bacteria and archaea are going to be prokaryotic. Now, eukaryotic is actually split into 4 kingdoms. So if you write on the first page there that you've got plants, animals, fungi, and protists in the eukarya, and then on the second page, you're looking at list the 4 kingdoms within the domain eukarya. So those 4 kingdoms are going to be plantae, fungi, animalia, and protists. I'm just looking that you have the correct idea. So if you were to tell me on an exam, kingdom plants, I'm fine with that because you've got the right concept. So all of these, everybody in the eukarya are going to have nuclei in their cells. So going down from, we just talked about domains, we just talked about the kingdoms within eukarya. So your next question on the study guide asks you to list the 8 levels of the classification system. So here we've got domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So species is going to be a very small subset, whereas domain is going to encompass a whole bunch of life. So a silly memory trick to help you remember the order of this would be Dom, King, Philip. Philip goes with phylum, kingdom goes with king, domain goes with dom. Chases, that goes with class, ordinary, order, families, family, Girl Scouts. Okay, I know it's kind of a twisted sentence because what is King Philip going to do later? But that is a sentence that helps you remember. So our next question on the study guide asks, what does the term science mean in Latin? So the word science is derived from a Latin verb meaning to know. So science is a way of knowing. There are other ways to know about the world. We can have artistic ways, we can have spiritual ways, we can have philosophical ways. So in this class, we're just going to cover science. But to be a well-rounded student, you want to explore all the other ways of knowing. But in this class, we will only be discussing science, and we do an entire unit on evolution. So I will provide some links to students who struggle between science and their spiritual leaders. So, but no one will ever disrespect anybody in a discussion in a classroom if it's a face-to-face about their belief system, but we will only be discussing science. There are some great classes at FRCC like philosophy of religion, and creationism is a form of religion. So every culture out there has its creation story. So it's just not a place where, a science classroom is not a place where we discuss those. So what makes science different from these other ways we just spoke about of thinking? So science depends on observations and measurements that others can verify. Sorry, I said clarify, verify, same word. And the requirement that ideas or hypotheses are testable by experiments that others can repeat. So this is big. One thing that science can't do for you is if you were to ask the question, is this painting beautiful? Science would not be able to answer that question. So there are some things that science cannot answer, but we're going to focus on the things that science can answer. So there's 2 main scientific approaches, descriptive or discovery science and hypothesis-driven science. In actuality, having been a scientist on a lab bench for 10 years, it is kind of a combination of the 2. So descriptive or discovery science This is where you have someone like Jane Goodall studying chimps. She made incredible notebooks filled with observations. Someone else can come along and repeat those. Then we've got hypothesis-driven science. So this uses the scientific method, which we're going to go into a lot in the next few slides. And we have the term hypothesis. So you need to go back to your first page of the study guide and see hypothesis written there. This is going to be a tentative explanation that a scientist proposes for a specific phenomenon that has been observed. It can be tested. An easier way of putting this is an educated guess. Okay? The funny thing about hypothesis, I keep looking at the time, that's why I keep doing that. People in normal language use the word theory very loosely. They say, I have a theory about such and such. What they really mean is that they have a hypothesis. So people in day-to-day language are using the word theory when they should be using the word hypothesis. So now we're kind of moving into the scientific method. So if you look on the bottom of page 2 of your study guide, I want you to outline the steps of the scientific method. We're going to be using this again and again. If you're in my in-class, we're going to be designing labs ourselves in person in the labs. If you are in my online class, you are going to be using the scientific method as you go through the McGraw-Hill online labs. So we always start with an observation. Then we ask a question, why is that so? Then we have a hypothesis and a prediction that are very close to each other. Predictions usually start with, if this happens, then that's going to happen. It's kind of a reworded hypothesis. And then you always have to test, experiment, additional observations. Your test is either going to support your hypothesis or it does not support your hypothesis and you need to come up with a new one. A lot of people try to say this test proves the hypothesis. We don't like to use the word prove because you could have designed a bad experiment. So we say it supports the hypothesis. Here is an example in real life where we've got a woman with a broken flashlight. She makes the observation, my flashlight is broken. She asks the question, why is my flashlight broken? I wonder, the hypothesis would be, I wonder if the batteries are dead. If I replace the batteries, then the flashlight would work. Then you can test it. Okay, so the test is going to support the hypothesis if the batteries were indeed dead, or perhaps her 2-year-old put oatmeal into the flashlight and that's why it didn't work. So you can always think of a new way of why, if your hypothesis is not supported after your test.